What was the final straw that made you quit a job? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. I was told I should have managed my time off better. My mom was found dead in her apartment. The coroner couldn't even guess the day she died. I had to clean her apartment, go to court hearings of her behalf, and was relentlessly harassed by another family that thought she had any kind of money, and I had to go to the police. I took 4 days off. I needed to get out of work like 2 hours early to pick up her ashes and got hit with that. I was hired at a different company the next day. I came in to have lunch with my coworkers and clean out my things and just left. Management or HR never bothered to call me. They knew. Story 2. After years of no raises due to budget constraints, I learned that a newly hired coworker was making like 30% more than me. Didn't help that he absolutely sucked. Story 3. Worked in a factory a few years ago. Pay was decent, but the guy who operated the indoor crane was an alcoholic. The moron almost took my head off with the hook. A colleague who saw it told me he was amazed that he didn't hit me. Moron wasn't even reprimanded. I got a job at another factory a few miles away just 2 days later. They had heard of the abysmal reputation of that place as they had already hired 4 people from there before me. Story 4. I was the de facto manager at a hobby store back in 2001. The owner had chased everyone else off. I was doing all the manager duties at the pay of a regular store associate. One day I come in and one of our regular customers is behind the counter. I ask him what's going on and he says he's the new manager. I went with it for a few months. Turns out the guy was a snake. He tried to lock me in the bathroom, so I'd clean it. Next day when the owner was there doing orders, I threw my key at him, told him to go himself and left. I walked to the other end of the strip mall and was promptly hired at mailboxes, etc. Story 5. In college, I worked at a grocery store. I either worked mid-shifts or I closed the store. We closed at 12 a.m. On a morning after I closed, the store manager was calling me from 6, 7 a.m., asking me where I was and telling me that if I didn't come in, I was getting a write-up. I had never opened the store. I also worked until 12 a.m. the night before. I didn't appreciate her bullshit threats of writing up. I walked into the store in my pajamas, found her, and handed her my keys. Story 6. Edit, it's a long read. I apologize ahead of time. My last job, I was warehouse manager, installer, and delivery for heavy arcade equipment over 3 years. They had a high turnover rate, but my boss was cool. Later on, I found out why the turnover rate was high. The company owner was a massive prick. The day I quit, I was going through a heavy depression, but still showed up to work because I did enjoy the work. I showed up at 6:50 a.m. Clock in is at 7 a.m. Used the bathroom, I come out and the owner was outside waiting for me to come out. No good morning, no how are you, nothing. Just, clock in time is at 7, right? I look at the clock and it's 6:58. I looked at him and say good morning and walk to the punch, ignoring his comment. I start my work day and look at the sheet for what I have for the day. It's a packed day from start to finish. About 30 minutes into the shift, I just lost all drive. Again, depression my mind kept racing about everything I had to do, and then some. My heart started pounding, I was short on breath and started to feel like I wanted to barf. I called my boss and explained the situation, asked if I could go home, and he told me yes. Have a good day and I hope you feel better. Call me if you want to talk. I didn't even pack my personal tools, I just clocked out, got in my truck, and started crying completely on edge. Sat there for 20-ish minutes. The owner comes out with a pissed-off face, asking why I'm not working, getting ready for the day. I told him I was having a bad morning and I needed to leave. I had already confirmed with B that it was okay to take the day. The owner then says, no, you already clocked in. You have to finish your shift. I'm usually a cool, calm, and relaxed person at work, but as soon as he said that, I completely lost it. I got out of the truck and the first things out of my mouth before I could even think were, I don't have to do a thing. If I said, I'm having a bad morning, you seem to forget I'm here because I choose to be here. You don't pay me anywhere near enough for the amount of responsibility and work that I do. He stared at me with a WTF just happened expression. Then following what I said before he even got a word in, I blurted out, you know what? If I can't leave, then I quit plain and simple, find someone else that can do everything I do and isn't going to complain or steal from you. Got back in my truck and left, skipped out on a week and a half of work, never even left the house. Then my boss calls me asking if I'm okay and that he saw what happened on the camera in front of the building and apologized for it on behalf of the owner. Asked me to come back and all. I said I'd come back under the conditions that I get a raise and a helper. He said, yes, we can talk about it here. I show up the next day, everything is cool. Then the owner shows up talking about how it was extremely disrespectful the way I spoke to him, blah, blah, blah. I looked at B and said, you know what, man, I'm good. I'm just going to look for something else. 3 days later, I was at a company across the street getting paid almost twice what I was making with them, with none of the responsibility or problems. I'm still friends with B. Last we spoke, he said they had to hire 3 people to do what I was doing. All the owner had to do was agree to what I was asking for in some respect. He would have saved a ton more money than hiring 3 people. Edit Durant 2. This was the first time in my life I experienced angry depression with a panic attack alongside it that turned into more anger. Story 7. I was working as an IC for 5 years with the same company. I handled multiple clients at any given moment and was the longest employee my boss had. There had never been an issue. I had never considered leaving the position as it was work from home, allowed me a little more control over my schedule, and paid decently. Fast forward to September of last year, my biggest client, who took up literally a third of my income, decided they wanted a different contractor because of one spelling error on an internal memo, despite knowing that I'm dyslexic. As an IC, I have no protections. I figured things would suck for a month, that I would have to pinch pennies, but my supervisor would hand me a client soon as she claimed that she had a backlog of clients that she needed to pair with someone. It never happened. Instead, I was told that she couldn't trust me to do my job, that maybe the way her company does the job isn't for me, and a bunch of other things that made absolutely no sense. This is a virtual assistant company. I've been an executive assistant for more than a decade. It's something I'm extremely good at. After that meeting, I started looking elsewhere. It took me until February of this year, but I'm now in a job that I absolutely love and thrive in, even if I'm not working from home anymore. Definitely made the right decision because my ex-supervisor tried to gaslight me into staying when I gave her a week's notice. My contract that I had signed 5 years prior, that had a rollover clause, had a mandatory 1-week notice. Those who had signed on in the past year had a mandatory 2-week notice with a recommendation of 30 days. Needless to say, I told her that her lack of planning was not my problem and that maybe she should think twice about punishing her hardest workers by threatening their livelihood. Story 8. Had an IT problem crop up that took out email. I was the fill-in IT person, the only IT person. The regular IT guy was away and somewhere at the time, uncontactable. Boss hounded me for hours until the issue was fixed. It was an issue that shouldn't have been able to happen, but we were using such ancient versions of the AV and MS Exchange that it did. For those wondering, the AV took out the mail store. We were one of the biggest sellers of both products. New versions would have cost us nothing. A week later, I was called into the owner's office and he had a go at me for letting my sales figures drop for the month. The month I was also doing all the IT. I knew where he heading, so I pointed out all the faults in the company and how they all led back to him and his lack of leadership. Silly man had left his office door open, so everyone heard every word I said. I then clearly articulated exactly what he could do with his job. Spoke to the payroll person on the way out. Had every cent I was entitled to be the close of business that day. Cost the business a $15K a deal on software sales. The IT guy quit the next day in solidarity, and 2 other salespeople found the door. Story 9. When I got a write-up because the manager decided he wanted to throw me under the bus for his manipulation of our inventory to cover the audit we were about to get. This was a day after I found out my dad had cancer. Threw my badge right in his face and walked out. Story 10. We had internal employee satisfaction surveys, and our department consistently ranked amongst the highest in the company. New director comes in and absolutely destroys morale, and our next survey reflects that. He has a fit and blames his managers. He believed that nothing would ever stick to him because he was such a greasy little, but we stuck that to him. I left shortly thereafter. On my last day, he comes ripping into the office at 10 after 5, and I have tidied everything up and am about to walk out the door. He tells me to hold on as he has to conduct my exit interview. It lasts about 10 minutes before devolving into an expletive-filled screaming match. It was awesome. Story 11. I had a manager once who would agree to things but never wanted it in writing. He just shrugged it off as is an informal guy. Like, sure to go, but you can leave early on Tuesdays and finish your shift from home so your wife can go to work and you can be home for the bus. hunky-dory until he decided it wasn't and threw me under the bus for working an arrangement he never agreed to. I learned a lot about CYA from working for that douchebag. Story 1-2. I'm a French-trained chef with a degree in restaurant management who's been cooking for 16 years now. I had a shift lead who was notorious for undercooked everything and sending out raw beef and chicken tell me, "Just shut up and do what I tell you, or I'm sending you home." I looked him dead in the eyes, took off my apron, told him I quit, and went home. Motherfucker made people sick with his food, and he tried to tell me that the chili was still fine after being out of temp for an hour. Story 1-3. I was asked to shovel snow all around our building, which is large BTW, when I was the only one in my department while they have a ton of other people in other departments. I get behind on my work, and literally no one could help me catch up while I waste an hour doing that. No, that place. Story 1-4. I spent a year reorganizing workflow. I ended up getting profit up by 9% without increasing revenue. That simply meant less wastage. Then a new, higher-up manager came in, looked around and said, "Dude, I've never seen a place run like this. Let me fix it," and proceeded to insist on putting everything back to how it had been. Story 1-5. Outperformed my goals but underpaid on my bonus because my sales peers underperformed, not my actual team or myself, and I'm already going above and beyond, working 10 to 16 hours each day carrying dead weight. Story 1-6. Was forced to move. Found out that the state I was moving to, people got paid 1% more. Got a hold of the HR document that explicitly said how much, so I had to fight for that raise. Was playing D&D with a guy who just graduated college, working in the same field, and he was making literally double what I was. Found a much better paying job shortly after. Story 1-7. They wouldn't promote me. My boss had quit and I was doing all of the work already, just as I had for the 10 months before they hired the boss that quit, so I got the promotion elsewhere. They had the gall to tell me that I was just about to get the promotion if I was willing to stay. I told them I'd think about it just to lead them on, but I was out the door. Story 1-8. Haven't quit yet, but I recently had my final straw moment. My manager, who knows about my hobbies, and that I do said hobbies to deal with the stress of work, indicated I'm spending too much time doing what I enjoy and that I'm not spending enough of my energy at work. To clarify, my job consumes most of my energy and leaves me mentally and emotionally exhausted at the end of the day. I do physical activities after work, during my evenings and weekends, to cope and reduce my stress levels. It has never once interfered with my job, aside from making it easier to deal with. This comment comes after I performed well during one of the hardest years of my life because I had an outlet. I'm done. Already sending out resumes. Story 1-9. Was the new guy on an assembly line. I was the only new guy on that line. Was outing together pieces of sound systems. I was step 1 in the process. Everyone was dead silent, and until breaks, the only voices I heard were people passing the tested piece back to me saying, "You messed up. 10 hours a day you messed up," or some variation of it. You messed up? You messed up. You messed up. Every day, all I would hear for over a month. It just eroded my mental. Had there been any other chatter on the line, I think I would have been fine, even if it didn't involve me. But there wasn't. Didn't help that the boss was kind of sus, and we also sometimes had mandatory overtime that we wouldn't know about till near the end of the week. We wouldn't know if we were going to meet the quota until near the end of the week, which made planning for weekend activities a pain. Story 20. The managers did not care that a coworker was threatening to shoot us all. We had hundreds of text message proof. He finally fired her after she was called to his office because she was slacking at her position, and she said that his opinion was dumb. But it's crazy how nobody cares when someone says they want to shoot up the place with their uncle's rifles. Story 21. Year was 1999-2000, and I was 20 years old. I was on a crew of about 8-10 people installing underground fiber optic lines primarily around the Denver metro area. We typically worked 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Since most of us lived in a different city, we got hotel accommodations and 30-day per diem. I was dating the boss's daughter at the time, which he had no problem with initially because I had grown up a member of the same church. I was also a crew lead with an impeccable attendance and performance record. However, he caught wind of the fact that my co-workers and I were spending copious amounts of money on Jägermeister, weed, and various club on our spare time. He apparently was not jiving on that because he took all of our per diem down to the minimum of 15-day, and instead of a full checkup front for the week, It was a daily allowance. Understandable, I guess, but then he did something totally underhanded. Without warning one day, he hires this other dude and invited me to drive around with them, scouting out the new job locations for the upcoming week. I had no idea who this guy was. But instead of scouting out jobs, we scouted out used truck lots. After 5 hours of truck shopping, ass-kissing from the new guy, and openly discussing this new salary, higher than mine, and new job title of foreman, higher ranking than me, he picks out a 2-year-old F-250, pays cash for it, and gives the keys to the new guy as a signing bonus. Then gave me a wink and said something like, "You do the right things, you get treated the right way." I got back to my room that night, got incredibly plastered on Jaeger, and marched right up to his room and spat my resignation in his face, including breaking up with his daughter to him. Kind of forgot I was 200 miles from home. So in the middle of the night, I called my mom and she drove over the mountain to retrieve me and my suitcase. When I came to the next day at my parents' house, I was mortified to realize that I had just quit in that fashion. Oops. Story 22. Made a mistake that was easy to fix. Co-worker of mine reported this to the duty manager, who then publicly humiliated me in front of all my colleagues and then had the nerve to say that I would fail my university studies the way I was approaching my job. Man, I was pissed at the way the whole thing was handled, and I was very close to handing in my apron and saying I quit. Even now, nearly a decade later, it makes me angry thinking how I was treated. I never went back to that place after that shift. There were a lot of things fucked up about that place, but that incident sealed it for me. Fortunately, it was only meant to be a temporary gig anyway, and I returned back to university just a few days later. If I have a bad day at my current job, I always think at least my current working environment is so much better. Story 23. Boss came to my house on a Saturday night to do my performance review. It was actually my parents' house, and he scared the out of my dad, who pulled a gun on him. I had been using their house for my mailing address, LOL. Figured it was a sign when I made an HR complaint and was told I was in the wrong for putting the wrong address on my documents. He saw no repercussions, and I left as fast as I could. Story 24. I was a part-time stalker at a Sherwin-Williams. I made it very clear to my manager that this was my part-time gig for side money. I had my full-time job where I paid my bills and everything from Sherwin was just for hobbies. He was super cool and understood the situation. I show up, stock the shelves, and take care of the warehouse, then help customers with paint if needed. 14 hours a week, no problem. Easy money. My manager got promoted to regional sales manager, and our store got a new manager. We'll call her Jessica. Jessica came from a different store, and it was her first time managing. She was kind of all right, but also pretty annoying and would micromanage. Shortly after her joining, I moved apartments from 5 minutes away to about 45 away to be closer to my full-time job. The upside to this was I could stop by Sherwin's on the way and get supplies if my store needed something. Anyways, in my time there, I had some paint spill on my shoe. Nothing much, just a little white paint on the side of my black shoes. Jessica decided to change the dress policy one of the days I wasn't there, and really the only thing that changed was that you have to have all black shoes. This was never communicated to the team by anything other than the people there that day getting told. I show up to work after stopping by a couple of stores on the way to pick up material. Jessica is late ASF like usual, so I take care of the store with the assistant manager. She never mentioned the dress code change to me, so I still have no idea that there's been any changes. I'm working, taking care of some customers, and Jessica comes up to me, interrupts my conversation with the customer just to berate me about having white paint on my shoes. Again, this is a drip of paint, maybe 2 inches long at most, on the side of my shoe. She yells at me to go home and change my shoes. I'm confused by this, and the customer is looking at me like WTF is going on. I asked Jessica if she's kidding because, again, I have no idea there's been a dress code change. She tells me to go home right now and change my shoe. I double-check with her that she wants me to drive 45 minutes home, change shoes, and drive 45 minutes back with a decently busy store that's short-staffed. She said, yeah, leave now, bye. I head home, and as I'm sitting in traffic, I'm stewing. I'm annoyed and angry about this. It's a waste of my time. I called my dad to chat with him while I'm waiting, and he's appalled by it. After about 15 minutes of driving and chatting, I've made up my mind. I turn around and head back to the store. I get there and head straight into the back, grab my speaker and charger from my cubby, head into the office and erase my name off the board, scribble out my contact info on the sheet, and walk out. There's a huge line of people waiting to be helped, and Jessica is trying to take care of one of them. I butt into her conversation and give her a, "It was nice working here. Bye," then walk out. As I'm about to get into my truck, Jessica runs out and asks where I'm going. "Home, you were disrespectful, ASF, and an ass. Good luck, I'm out," and drove off. The best part was all of this was like 8 years ago, and I only just got my last check about a month ago. Story 25. Target Canada Starbucks. Wasted 6 weeks of trying, learn everything, and help as much as I could. The last day of training, I got hauled up into the office by the Dept MGR and assistant MGR, and for a good 10 minutes just gripe about all the flaws I had. Most of it had to do with my face, and then told me I'm horrible at customer service. I have a good case of resting face, and like most neurodivergents, I can mask it unless I need to really concentrate. The customer service part, the store isn't even open to the public, and the customer service was all role play, and I told them right at hiring I am absolutely at role playing. Anyways, they made me feel like I was back in grade 9 again, and I was a weepy, snotty mess. Clocked out. Husband took one look at me when he came to pick me up and said I'm not going back and will make do. Blocked their numbers, never looked back. Story 26. Working 6 days a week as a 32-hour-a-week salaried employee. Was asked to fill in for the manager who left with no pay raise. After complaining to highest levels, was told, until I work 120 hours a week, no help would be brought it. That's what it means to be a manager at this large healthcare organization. I had a new job and resigned within a month. Story 27. Ha ha. I worked at a digital marketing company some time ago. Maybe 2 or 3 months. I brought the division back to life and things were happening. The day I found out one of my subordinates was harassed by my boss and the owner of the company, I quit. It was not sexual harassment. She was threatened with police and all kinds of lawsuits for no reason. She, being a young and very talented lady, was almost held at gunpoint. The boss man was a convicted felon for grand larceny in California in the past. I showed him. Yep, that was the last straw. Story 28, 3 stories, 3 times managers decided to FAFO. Story 1, I used to work at a bar as a dishwasher, and I was worked doubles for 3 weeks straight, and when we finally get another dishwasher, I'm expected to train him ECT, so after busting my ass with 3 weeks of doubles 5 days a week, I asked for a raise and told I wasn't worth more than a 10-cent raise. So, 2 days pass, and I set up an interview for another spot, got hired fairly easy, and I was hired $2 more than I made at the shop, told old boy to F off, and I'm done. The other guy quit 4 days later, and they tried to work him like me when I did doubles for 3 weeks. They were left without a dishwasher for 1 day before they called me back and offered me 50 cents more to come back. I just laughed and told them, you, Fafo. If you want the other stories, LMN, Story 19. When I realized my opinion on any topic would be overlooked, even if I'm the biggest expert in the room. My old boss had the nasty habit of thinking he's the one who knows. Like I'm a programmer, 10 years experience, and the most he did at programming was a 2-3 week boot camp. But I thought he considered my opinion, even if grading, as equals. One day I got the example that anything that comes out of my mouth has no value to him. So basically, when COVID started to be less of an issue, we restarted going to the office once a month. Me being on his way to the office, we decided to have him pick me up on the way, save on fuel. Sure. On the way back, I see his GPS is stupid and just tell him, yo, cut through this parking lot and boom, you will be at my home. There is absolutely no way he knows more than me. That's my neighborhood and he lives half an hour further. But he brushes me off and decides to follow his GPS that sends us 2 lights further than it even should before turning around at my home. That's when I decided I need to change jobs. This. Story 30. When it took 4 years to get from 30K to 38K after 3 promotions up to manager and still doing the tasks of my 2 previous roles. When I asked to bump me to 40K, they said they couldn't because my boss wasn't making that. What do you mean? A supervisor isn't making 40K yet. I had to go. Poverty was catching up. Next job jumped me to 65K with less responsibility and workload. This was right before COVID inflation, so made it out just in time. P.S. Job hopping works because I doubled that the next year, still doing the same job with less responsibility. Story 31. It was Easter Sunday, and I was working at a Borders bookstore. Place was super dead since everyone expected it would be closed. I had finished all my sidelines work, restocking candy and gift cards, tidying up the back area, prepping books to be picked up. Since it was dead, I started reading a book. Mind you, this is the first time I ever read anything on the clock, but there was literally no customers in the store and nothing to do. The manager came up and put the book back, but didn't say anything. I picked it up again, and manager comes back and asked me to go into her office. She claimed that a manager who disliked me had said I was previously reading on the clock before, which I said was a lie. She said she'd watched the camera recordings, so I told her to do it. It'd just be a waste of her time because it never happened. Regardless, she says she's going to write me up for reading on the clock, which is tantamount to stealing from the company. I told her I've never been written up, and I wasn't going to start that day, and that I quit. Got to my parents' house just in time for Easter dinner being set down on the table. She said I'd never be able to work for Borders again, which I found very funny because I was already working another full-time job that paid almost twice as much. It got even funnier when Borders permanently went out of business only a couple years later. Still haven't been written up on the job to this day. Never walked off another job without notice, but have had zero regrets about doing it that time. Story 32. I was working inside a Home Depot advertising Parker & Son Services, air conditioning, so I had to approach people. I'm Italian, so I have an accent. This man started making racist remarks and mocking me with his little kids saying stuff like, "Do you understand what she's saying?" I just left, quit on the spot. Story 33. When a manager where I worked when I was 20 bullied so many of the staff, 3 of us got signed off by our doctors with stress. My doctor told me to write out my resignation and post it to them, stating my leave due to stress covers their notice period. I got a friend to hand deliver it and took great satisfaction knowing I'd never have to go back there, and they were screwed. Story 34. I was a custodian at the high school that I also graduated from. I was in charge of taking care of the swimming locker room, and those kids were assholes all year. One day I went in there, and they stuck pencils in the drains and snapped them off so the entire drain was full of broken pencils. I wrote my boss a note, went home, drove back, dropped off all my uniforms in a garbage bag, and I haven't been back to that hole since. Story 35. When I didn't get a raise because I had used all 5 of the sick days we were given per year, the CEO said that if you had to use all 5 sick days in a year, you were underperforming. It was a nonprofit and I was their vocational evaluator. I easily brought in 22 hours per month in assessments that I billed out to the state. I noped out of that place and got a new job paying a lot more. Story 36. When I was robbed, my boss would not give me and my coworker time off to deal with the trauma, and instead of giving us some time off, she said, "It's not the company's problem. I've been robbed before all the time when I worked at a gas station. Get over it. Some people just suck major ass." Story 37. Worked at a smoothie shop owned by an absolute Karen. She wrote up on the board one morning after I had closed the night before and said 20 was missing from the till, and that was one of these 3 people, then listed my name with the girl that was closing with me and someone else who had worked earlier, straight up accusing us of being thieves so that everyone who worked there could see. Later that day, she came in and said, "Good news, guys. I found the 20 stuck to another bill in the bank bag," as if it was no big deal. Ended up quitting immediately that day with no notice. Story 38. I was passed up for a promotion I rightfully deserved after working there for 10 years, being signed off years earlier for the promotion, but declining due to focusing on college, making it clear I wanted to be promoted now that I graduated college. Delivering outstanding results at the top of my department and staying in the field for the opportunity to promote while many others had left, only to be passed up by someone who was in the role for 6 months. I was absolutely livid and went off on my regional director, district manager, and direct manager. Told them to shove their 15-hour HR job up their ass, and their combined incompetence is what led to talent quitting. I put my 2 weeks in to quit right before Christmas Eve, and then proceeded to call off the Saturday before Christmas as one final middle finger to management. Didn't have a job lined up and took a month off to search. Found a job that respects me and pays me twice as much with much less stress and balanced schedule. Also got a managerial promotion a year into the job. Retail. And for anyone who is still stuck in it, it won't last forever and the grass is much greener on the other side. But you have to make the effort to look. Story 39. This sounds strange, but just realizing I didn't want to be there, later found out it was actually just being burnt out. I was a college student working another job at the same time, and I didn't actually need it. There were many things that had happened beforehand, and I knew that I would be handing in my notice at some point. I just wasn't sure when. Wrote up my notice when I got home and handed it in the next day. It seemed to really surprise my boss. Not really sure why it did, because I expressed to them for months that they really needed to replace the coworker that left, because I couldn't do two people's work in the same amount of time. Story 40. It took longer than it should. Damn my trusting nature. I was the seventh person to quit due to the owner's wife. She knew nothing about the business but made everyone miserable. I went to the business partner and told her I was leaving and why. She asked me to wait while they tried to get more of a buffer in place between her partner's wife and our staff. I tried, but of course, it didn't happen. 2 others have left since I have. Now in my 3rd year of the best job I've ever had with great teammates, benefits, and opportunities. So happy. Story 41. Was working at Toys R Us for a year and was thinking about quitting because the store manager did not like that. I was requesting hours off to go to college, and because of that, he would fluctuate my hours on purpose, making me work less hours at the beginning of the semester and ungodly hours at the end of the semester during finals when I had said I want the opposite multiple times. The final straw was him bringing in the regional manager claiming I was stealing to have a meeting with me. I asked for proof after he tried to bully me to confess, and then proceeded to tell the regional manager all of his behaviors before quitting on the spot. I then went home to do finals, got my associate's degree, and moved to a better university on a bunch of scholarships. Now Toys R Us is out of business, and I'm working in an office while that old manager is working in the cafe at my job. Story 42. My boss made us stay until 8 p.m. every night. Not even stay and work, just stay to keep her company. We weren't allowed to talk to one another, so we had to just sit there in silence and wait for her to be ready. My mom had been in a car accident earlier that year and almost didn't make it. Plus, she was turning 60, so her birthday was a huge deal. I told my boss this, and I still had to sit there in silence until 8 p.m. I missed my mom's birthday dinner. The next day, I quit. Story 43. The job I quit like this was actually a slow buildup of about 2 years, which is a freaking long time to try to make things work. I was a staff accountant at a housing nonprofit. Absolutely loved the job. My boss was a piece of with narcissistic tendencies. He was a workaholic and thought the place had to run like public accounting, crazy work hours, and no time off. I was supposed to be the supervisor of the accounting specialist, but I could never keep straight what he wanted in the department, and he wouldn't follow through with passing tasks down, which is why he hired me. To help him get stuff off his plate so he could do CFO tasks, I hit my breaking point 2 years in when he just wouldn't do what he said he'd do. The whole time he's like, I can't do this without you. I trust you, but he won't give me simple grant spreadsheets. He just is a control freak. So I go to the ED and HR and I'm like, I'm gonna walk. This is stupid. They convinced me to stay with promises of becoming controller and gave me a timeline. I'm like, okay, I will try some more. Same stuff happens. He won't give things over. My ED tells me one thing she wants me to do. He says the opposite. He criticizes my work like I can't make any mistake ever. Just the same bullshit. I had started therapy maybe around the 3rd year of being there, and all I knew was I was miserable. My therapist helped me see what was going on and gave me the courage to leave. The last straw was when I had to call out for a migraine. I get them pretty often, and if you know, you know. He lays into me because it happened on the last day of the month. He said he almost had a panic attack because it was the last day. Due to its Feb. It's not the end of the fiscal year, it's not Jan, and there are not a lot of tasks for the month end. I immediately started looking for jobs, and it took me a while to find one, but I finally left. They were terrible to me the last few weeks. My ED would come to my door and just sigh, saying she was disappointed. She essentially told me that she would keep him above anyone else there. I wanted to scream at them. He drove away at least 4 people in the 4 years I was there, and another 2 people after I had left. I'm appalled at what I put up with there. Story 44. Boss screamed at me and cussed at me. I emailed him my resignation without a conversation. My guess is he had screamed at a lot of people and got away with it. That entire culture was toxic. The screaming was the last straw after a lot of other issues, including forcing overtime on my team while making them salaried, 12-hour days, asking me to keep credit partners out of loop on changes to terms, etc. It all happened at the same time, and I was fortunate to never compromise my values. I walked away from a shiny title and a massive raise. That was 12 years ago. I haven't made that kind of money since that job, but I'm mostly happy and don't work for a holes. Story 45. Not me, but my brother. Supply chain manager for a small healthcare company. He's great at what he does and has worked his way up from the bottom. The manager responsible for corporate travel left the company, and my brother gets asked to take on those duties. A few months later, the manager in charge of production sourcing, which was just a corporate title for person that buys all of the office furniture, supplies, food, etc., quits, and my brother is asked to also take on that work. He is doing the work of 3 managers and not getting 1 cent more. After 2 months of this, he tells his boss that he needs one of these positions off his plate or to be compensated fairly. He gets told that they are still looking to fill the positions, but should have someone hired soon. He asks for a 10% raise and gets told, sorry, no room in the budget right now. He decides to find room in the budget and notices several expensive charter flights taken by the corporate heads. He draws up a proposal to save money using a different service and gets told, no, and don't ever suggest anything that impacts the bosses again. He puts his resume out there and within 48 hours has 4 different offers for interviews. He tells his boss he's taking 2 weeks off and uses the time to interview and gets offered the job at every interview. The day he comes back, he lets them know of his highest offer, a 50% pay increase with no move required, and only having to do the work of 1 person. His company asks for 24 hours to create a counteroffer. They come back with an offer of a 10% raise and that he'll be able to offload one of his responsibilities to a new hire coming in a week. He refused it and left at the end of the day for a better life. Story 46. Someone called me a nerd for the umpteenth time while I was eating my meatloaf in the break room. Then someone else argued that I wasn't really a nerd. Also, my pants weren't staying up very well, and people could see my He-Man underwear. Story 47. Was signed off for 2 weeks after a nervous breakdown. It was caused by various factors, but the bullying culture at my job was a big part of it. The final straw was my boss calling me on the Monday of the 2nd week, not to see how I was, but to tell me to come back as the rest of the team were struggling with my workload. Rest of the team had 4 clients each they dealt with. I had 16. I didn't ask for 4 times the workload of everyone else, but when I asked for some help, I was told no. When I asked for the clients to be shared out a bit, I was told no. I saw them all swanning off early, their work done whilst I was struggling under mountains of paperwork. We couldn't leave until our work was done. Story 48. The owner was awful and would just withhold paychecks if she didn't feel like coming in. And then when you finally got your check, at least 50% of them bounced. I would find out standing in the grocery checkout when my card would get declined. It was horrifying. This was in my 20s when I worked paycheck to paycheck, and maybe if they were apologetic or it happened rarely, it'd be one thing. But they just acted like it was normal. I worked there 9 months and at least 8 bi-weekly paychecks bounce. Story 49. I actually worked a pretty sweet gig as a night shift receptionist at a hotel. I worked with a guy around my age, and when it was slow, we could watch movies, game, and even go to the hotel gym while the other watched the desk. Plus, a night shift gets paid a lot more by law where I'm from. There was a problem, however. The hotel manager was like a classic, stereotypical 1960s bad boss, but gay. He'd come up behind the boys and overbearingly use their mouse on their computer. He would just start stroking their hair, and he would always show the girls some weird Dicks Off the Day website and talking like, isn't this one nice? While they're just saying, you know, after you know, as he's laughing. Now, I rarely met him because I was night shift, so in my day-to-day, his behavior didn't affect me, but obviously this was a problem. So eventually the reception had a senior staff member talk to the owner about this, in the response, have the manager hire another manager who's his friend-to-be reception manager as a filter between reception and the hotel manager. Okay, there is at least talk that the hotel manager will have his office somewhere else, which never happens, but his behavior did change. The new manager then sends an email saying she'd like to meet each shift and schedules a time a couple of weeks later. Me and my colleague use the time to think of ways to improve the hotel, and when the shift meeting arrives, it is revealed to be individual, and my night shift colleague who had worked there much longer than me gets fired, and I'm informed that from now on, I'll be working nights alone. Now, I had gotten quite close to my colleague. In fact, I'm going to his wedding in just a couple weeks. Plus, he had worked there longer, and he did most of the tedious work, like allocating rooms or doing the books, which he preferred, because I would handle the guests, which I preferred. So basically, in my eyes, I would more than double my workload while making it impossible to do all the fun stuff I could do at work with a partner. And they fired my friend who loved his job, was definitely better at it than me, wanted to make the hotel better, and the only reason I could possibly think why they fired him and not me was because he got paid around $200 more than me a month. I was making around $4,700 USD a month after tax, which is minimum wage for night shift reception in my country. I left the meeting and sat at my desk for about 5 minutes, still in shock. They want to have 2 managers for 6 receptionists. I stuck my head in the manager's office door and told them I quit. I'm done. This is my final day. The look of shock was incredibly satisfying. The other night shift also got halved, and the one that wasn't fired immediately asked to be switched to day shift. From what I heard, the night shift was a complete show for months. Every other receptionist eventually ended up quitting. Both managers were fired, resigned within the year. Story 50. I've quit all my fast food jobs mid-shift, because how am I going to do the work of 4 people and still get yelled at to do more while the manager back there picking the ass or whatever? Now I'm about to quit my first retail job because how am I in trouble when I was trained to do something and told to do it only for them to come back almost a year later and yell at me saying, I can't do that since it's not part of my job and I'm going to get them in trouble. Y'all told me to diet. If I wasn't supposed to, don't tell me to. Story 51. They garnished my wages for unpaid student loan payments that were not mine without informing me first. The person who owed the money has the same name and lives in same metro area, but the company didn't bother to verify the DOB or SSN on the garnishment request. The timing couldn't have been worse as I had just returned from maternity leave. But adding insult to injury is that the day I found out what had happened, I was so upset that I left work early. I was working as a therapist for kids with ASD at the time and didn't feel I could be very therapeutic, but had to take PTO for leaving early. I eventually got my money back, but barely got an apology. Story 52. Ah man, I worked as a receptionist for a dermatologist and absolutely loved it and the doctor, but that eventually turned into an office management position. When she decided to open up more locations, she decided to hire her sister to help me. Spoiler, didn't need the help, nor did she help. Day 1 of her starting, I got constant emails of what I was doing wrong, even though that had never been expressed to me over the years. I worked there by anyone else or the doctor themselves, constantly passive-aggressive or just mean girl energy, like purposely leaving me out of coffee runs with the nurses or things like that. I would try and go to the doctor about it, but she would get defensive because duh, it's her sister. Final straw, and the day I quit and didn't work 2 weeks was when I got an email saying that she couldn't continue to do my job for me, and if we needed to find someone who could do the job, she would. Mind you, I technically did 3 people's job, wrapped up into the title of office manager with little pay to show for it. From what I've heard, it's a complete mess at that office now. Treat good employees good is my motto. Story 53. This will sound bad for me, but I waited a year for them to sign documents finalizing my partnership agreement. They also had not paid me back thousands in expenses for nearly 2 years. The final straw was that they now decided that I would have to fly to New York and meet clients every month. They told me this meant wearing suits and spending a week in their office for FaceTime. To me, that meant more expenses unpaid and time away with zero additional benefit to me. Backstory, small consulting company. I was promoted to director and given a raise. My job became doing everything in my old position, plus all the hiring and people management for basically the entire company's product, software development consulting. The next year, they offered me a partnership with a small raise. This included 10% profit sharing. I knew there were no profits and the company was just barely getting by. That's what happens when you are still paying your old disgruntled partners and paying back money you stole from the government. They took out the COVID EIDL loan like everyone else did and lied and told me it was forgiven. I decided foolishly to accept, and it took months for a contract to be signed. In that time, my shares went from 10% ownership to 5%. They decided I didn't do enough, and they converted some back pay they owed me into a bonus. I also had 0 voting rights with this agreement, as they decided to invent junior partner just for me. The owners didn't like giving away voting rights for free. I knew this was the best I was going to get if I wanted to stay, and I just didn't have the motivation at the time to start a job hunt. So I worked on 60 to 70-hour work weeks. I become more involved in the sales cycle. People tend to like me, and having someone smart and knows what they're talking about on sales calls. They liked me, and they signed contracts to work with me and the teams I put together. The other partners, who were still my boss, since I'm a junior, decided I would fly out much more frequently. I brought up that I would need to be reimbursed for this travel, and I was very frustrated that I had been added the responsibility of sales on top of engineering manager, project manager, coder, recruiter, HR, and IT manager. What the heck were the other partners even doing? So I brought up all of this and was told that I don't understand how businesses work and that things would get better, that they would eventually reimburse me. Well, I refused to fly anymore, and I started looking for new work. When I left, everything imploded within a few months. Every contract that I helped land, they had been fired from. It was very sad because many of my coworkers were laid off, and I really cared about their success. Story 54. My crazy stalker ex-boyfriend started sending his nonsense to my work email. He had previously tried breaking into my apartment, so I broke a lease and moved. Threatened to kill my pets and showed up at my mom's house to menace her about me. He had guns and knives and really had it out for me. I worked in a public space frequented by families with small children. When I took the emails to my manager and told her I was leaving for the day, I had thrown up and was covered in hives, to talk with the police, again, she pulled a face and just said, "Okay, be sure to clock out." When I came back the next day, I overheard her telling another admin staff that she was confident I was faking the whole situation. Never mind I had the police reports to prove it, or that I lined up a job interview the next day and quit before the end of the month. They threw me a going-away party, and I only showed up for 5 minutes and refused the exit interview. When I handed in my resignation, she made some snide comment about my new job being way more money. I regret not telling her I took an initial 20% pay cut, but the job was in a secured private building with 24-hour security. I'm still with the same company, and I have moved up to make way more money than I ever could have in that previous place. If I ever run into her, though, I'm going to be the biggest her. She was a bad boss and a bad person. Story 55. As a teen, I worked 5 hours at a day home for autistic children in the west side of Vancouver. Staff physically abused the children, tied the children up, and forced medications into their mouths. I refused to do any of this. When I went home, I told my mom everything and slept for about 14 hours. I didn't even pick up my paycheck. At my mom's insistence, I wrote down everything that I had witnessed along with the employees' names. The next day, my mom phoned the appropriate authorities. The appalling behavior of the staff in the institution was properly dealt with. Story 56. A riot broke out in a boarding house I worked in. 2 tribes of indigenous 16, 17-year-old man, sized boys with weapons. Any object not tied down was a missile. They smashed every window in the place, and it just myself and another female house parent in the middle of it all. I was scared for my life. I had given the head of the boarding school a heads up it was going to happen because I saw it brewing all day, and they told me it was fine, and they'd deal with it all that afternoon. After 7 cop cars broke up the riot brawl, the principal of the school came into the room I was in and basically told me to toughen up. It was all cleaned up by the cleaners, new windows were put in, everyone carried on like it never happened. That. Story 57. My employer, Small Biz, mismanaged things so badly that I took a 10-day trip and came back to discover that the entire company nearly went under while I was gone. There was also a regular situation where the company credit card would keep getting declined, so we'd have to pay suppliers using our personal credit cards and be reimbursed later. It was disappointing because there were promises that my role would evolve into a bigger one in the future, but after that, I knew it was all a lie. Story 58. I didn't quit, but I almost did cause a manager spoke to me in such a way no other manager at any other job I've ever had would, or should for that matter. They were comfortable hiring a dude who showed up to a first responding job, even hungover at times and barely paying attention to his staff or patrons on some days. One shift I spent my 15, more like 8, min break doing his job on one of the hotter days of the summer, checking on my coworkers. None of them had water. All of them were hungry and exhausted, and I snuck a girl chocolate just to give her anything. Manager the whole time was playing games on his phone in the office with the fan. Before that summer started, I asked for the manager position, and I was told the roles were filled and they didn't need anyone. That's who they picked over me, who'd been there much longer and knew the job and staff well. That manager ended their first season there with 3 complaints written to the bosses and many more who wanted them gone. Never in the few years I've worked there have I seen that happen. I might be going back over the summer for a day job while I work nights elsewhere, but that place will never have the respect it did from me that it used to. Story 59. When my boss went on vacation, We had to pick up some slack while she was gone, and it was really difficult for me and my coworkers. We made it through the week and were all really proud of our performance and got most everything done that we usually did with a few exceptions. But when she came back, she said that in a meeting they had, it was brought up by someone that we didn't work hard enough while she was gone and basically implied that we had been slacking because she wasn't there to moderate us. It was devastating, and we were all upset because we had worked so hard and got so much done despite the extra workload. To top it off, one of my coworkers from a different department said that no one in the meeting actually said that about us. It was just my boss who was saying it. That coworker actually encouraged me to leave once I told her I was looking for another job and said she didn't blame me. A year later, I found out my boss got fired not long after I left. Story 60, I was going out of my way to train everyone and support the manager who lived halfway across the country. Got micromanaged because my sales were slipping. Manager had a new favorite, and I became good friends with him. After 5 months, he told me she was trying to get me fired because I was getting on her nerves. Job paid great for 23-year-old, but it wrecked my car, and the jobs they gave me consistently went further and further. I missed my girlfriend, so I quit with no job lined up. Anar, Story 61. This is going back years to the 90s. I was working at a local ice rink, which I absolutely loved. My job flopped between an arcade attendant, skate guard, and supervisor, essentially watching over the kids in a play area. I was at the job for about 4 years at this point. My manager at the time asked me to help them disassemble one of the 2 big attractions in the rink. It was fun, easy at first, but eventually turned into a lift hundreds of pounds of steel and get them into the waste. I started to realize the job was more for construction or deconstruction and not the jobs I was hired for. For $12 an hour wasn't happening, nor did I want to do this, nor could I handle that heavy lifting. I gave my 2 weeks notice, telling them I was moving on and will be getting an office job, which did through a temp agency. Office job, while only lasting 2 years, ending up being one of my most favorite jobs. Story 62, an absolute piece of boss that demanded I give up my 3-day weekend to help a team that didn't plan an implementation and just decided to do it anyway. I asked my boss why he didn't call the actual on-call person, and his response was, "Because I'm calling you." That was the final straw. He got fired 6 months after I left because he got called out on all his lies. In the time he was there, close to 12 people on his teams quit. He went into state politics after that. He should fit in there just fine. Story 63. Worked as a mobile technician working on trucks. We covered breakdowns 1 week in 4, and it was always busy, and some nights out late, etc. They implemented a lot of controls on overtime and how it was booked, claimed it was for welfare. A month or 2 after that, I was made to stay out until around 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning, did a pretty much 24 shift while driving in between jobs. Found out the last job was requested for the following Monday, but since I was out, the call handler sent me. On top of that, one of the jobs before that had another engineer around the corner, but again, they sent me because I'm the on-call engineer. A couple days into the next week, I get questioned on 90 minutes overtime from the previous month. I was in a new job within 3 weeks. Story 64, does part-time during school count? When I was in school, I used to have some Saturday part-time jobs because I simply wanted more money without asking my family for it. The horror job that topped everything was at a very fancy, or so they wanted to appear, French-style patisserie. The owner was a stupid, disrespectful hag who lacked good manners and I think overall sanity. This woman was not able to speak like a normal person, but screamed and screeched without an end. She yelled at me constantly, was absolutely disgusting and disrespectful towards me, belittled me in front of her customers, repeatedly told me I am not a fit for gastronomy. I only laughed because I was getting my education with my 6 languages and now I am working in the legal field. Ha ha ha, yeah, take that, you cake hag. She was mostly keeping me there overtime to clean at the end of the day and was demanding that I still work whole Saturdays when I was shortly before my final exams. I obviously needed the extra time to study, but she didn't care. The final straw for me was when she wrote me a very belittling and disrespectful email insulting my intelligence. I just never showed up again and only demanded a written confirmation from her that I quit. On rare occasions, I still walk past her stupid patisserie and hope she chokes on her wannabe French cakes that are flavorless and taste like pure sugar. Story 65. My new district manager insulted my bullet journal. It seems petty, but it was literally the straw that broke the camel's back. I began managing a small pet store at the beginning of COVID. I worked my butt off to make sure my team stayed safe. Only 3 out of 12 staff members caught COVID during the entire pandemic. I doubled store profit, and my team won several awards each year. We did all that while operating in an unsafe neighborhood and constantly getting our hours cut. During my last year, my hours were cut so badly that I could only schedule 1 team member per shift. I had to schedule creatively so that people could get lunch breaks, but that means people had to open, close alone, and could not take bathroom breaks. I told them to lock up and go to the bathroom anyways. There was a glitch that doubled inventory whenever we scanned it in, leading to inaccurate inventory counts. There was another glitch that created an additional register if the internet crashed during the day, which led to a huge cash shortage at night and a cash overage of the same amount on the next night. I documented and reported issues. I advocated for better hours. I was punished when there were cash and inventory problems, despite the reported glitches. I was punished if a customer complained about lack of service, despite the lack of staff. Finally, my quarterly bonus was changed to a yearly bonus that could only be received if you worked 12 months each year. I finally decided to apply elsewhere and received a few offers. While debating whether to entertain the offers, my new district manager visited my store. I was ready to talk about the condition of the store and ask for support. I wasn't too proud to ask for help. Immediately, he began shitting on everything. Every other word out of his mouth was an insult. The old district manager, he was touring with him, had to pull him to the side and ask him to take it easy. He didn't take it easy, and finally ended in the office where I kept my notes. He picked up my bullet journal and began micromanaging how I organized my daily tasks. That day, I had a simple bullet list of to-do items and a small handful of reminders at the bottom of the page. Nothing fancy and easy to follow. I didn't have time that day to make anything more elaborate. I decided to say it and responded to a few of the job offers. I had a new job lined up in less than a week.